Good evening. Today is Thursday, May 9th, 2024. It is our 7 p.m. normally scheduled council meeting. We will start with our call to order and our opening prayer with Pastor James Case from Tallmadge Lutheran Church.
Will you pray with me, please? Eternal God, our Father, we come before you tonight to do your will for the betterment of Tallmadge, Ohio. We pray that you will direct our path in serving you and the people of Tallmadge by our acts and by our actions. Help us so not too much in making decisions of what we think, but make our actions on things that we have learned from, gained wisdom about, so they will help us help others in your name. Bless our mayor, our council, our city officials, and all people who serve you by serving one another. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. I'll ask Mr. Rohr. We'll do Mr. Rohr tonight to lead us in the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Well done, Mr. Rohr. All right. Time for roll call. Clerk, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Jonathan Bolus.
Here.
Adam Bozick.
Here.
Jessica Epstein.
Here.
Mary Gutman.
Here.
Donald Pavlik.
Here.
Ted Roy.
Here.
Nick Rubino.
Here.
We are all present this evening. Moving on to item 4, correcting and adopting previous meeting minutes from 4/25/24, our regular meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Madam Clerk?
Adam Bozick.
Yes.
Jessica Epstein.
Yes.
Mary Gutman.
Yes.
Donald Pavlik.
Yes.
Ted Roy.
Yes.
Nick Rubino.
Yes.
Jonathan Bolus.
Yes.
Minutes passed 7-0. Moving on to financial reports. Fire and EMS fund transfer in the amount of $255,000. Street maintenance and repair fund transfer in the amount of $255,000. Bond retirement transfer in the amount of $125,000. The police pension transfer in the amount of $87,500 from the general fund. Bond retirement transfer in the amount of $101,300 from the Safety Services Income Tax Fund. Bond retirement transfer in the amount of $11,975 from the Tallmadge Reserve Incentive District. And advance to Tallmadge Reserve Incentive District TIF in the amount of $11,975 from the general fund to council on 4/29/24. Appropriation report, fund report, and revenue report for the period ending 4/30/24 to council on 5/6/24. April financial reports to council on 5/6/24. Tallmadge Recreation Center profit and loss report for the period ending 4/30/24 to council on 5/6/24. Income tax comparisons for the period ending 4/30/24 to council on 5/6/24. Consolidated investment portfolio for the period ending 4/30/24 to council on 5/6/24. Income tax by source report for the month of April to council on 5/6/24. And lastly, the revenue comparison for major funds for the period ending 4/30/24 to council on 5/6/24.
I'll make a motion to approve the reports as presented.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion about the report or questions for our administration? Hearing none, Madam Clerk?
Jessica Epstein.
Yes.
Mary Gutman.
Yes.
Donald Pavlik.
Yes.
Ted Roy.
Yes.
Nick Rubino.
Yes.
Jonathan Bolus.
Yes.
Adam Bozick.
Yes. Moving on to item 6, public hearings. We currently have none this evening. Item 7, community input. We currently have one in the audience. Mr. Case, would you have anything for us this evening?
No, sir.
No? All right, thank you.
I can think of something.
Moving on to item 8, agenda additions. Anything to add to our agenda this evening? Hearing none. I did have one question regarding our executive session. I know we didn't have one on the schedule for this evening. Didn't know if we needed one to discuss any current issues. No?
I sent an email to council earlier this week, and that's all there is to report with regard to that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item 9, reports of the administrative officers. We'll start with Mayor Kilway.
Okay, thank you. Susan, can you start the slideshow? There we go. Okay. Make sure I can figure this out. I got to turn it on, sorry. Okay, so I was going to introduce our Director of Administration, Joe Ignazito, today. He was supposed to be here. He texted me late last night and was not able to make it up from DC. So here's just a brief little bio of him. He was a former Tallmadge Police Department sergeant and then a U.S. Army veteran. He worked at various most senior levels with the Army and the Department of Defense. He's a recognized expert as a policy advisor and interagency liaison. He's going to be a great asset to the whole team here at Tallmadge. So there's just a little bio on him, a little update on him. Next, David Klein was recognized by the U.S. House of Representatives, specifically Congresswoman Amelia Sykes, for his years of service as mayor of Tallmadge. And she states, Mr. Klein's drive to lead is commendable, and I have no doubt that he has bettered countless lives as a result of his steadfast service. And I just thought that was a very appropriate for everything that he's done, not only as mayor, but as service director, as firefighter. I thought that was very nice kudos that he received today from the U.S. House of Representatives. Stealing a little bit of Megan's thunder here, Tallmadge did have a prescription drug take-back day. 149.1 pounds of prescription drugs were collected, 65.9 pounds of empty pill bottles, boxes, and waste. And as you guys all know, Tallmadge Police Department is a permanent drop-off location for Summit County's Dispose of Unused Medication Properly program. So if anyone in the audience that's listening, if they happen to have missed this and they want to get rid of some prescription medication, they can just go to the Tallmadge Police Department and drop it off in the box there. Tallmadge Little League Parade was great. We had perfect weather. There's over 500 participants in the Little League program, as you guys all know, because you have kids involved in it. I just was able to take a quick picture with the state champion softball players, so thought I'd share that with everybody. Before we get to this slide, I am working with the Tallmadge Historical Society. They are working on plans for 2025. In 2025, it'll be the 200th anniversary of the first Congregational Church, the actual building that's on the circle is 200 years. And then also, it's the 200th anniversary of the Tallmadge United Methodist Congregation. So they're doing a nice celebration. It'll be next year. I think they've got a couple days in July picked out. We're at the beginning stages of doing some organizing on that. Did have the, I'll just get to that right there. The electronic recycling is this Saturday from 10 o'clock in the morning until 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it is at the rec center. Economic development did have a couple business retention meetings with the Whole Shop and White Swan Cleaners. As you all know, the owners of White Swan Cleaners own those 3 plazas right there on West Avenue, and they've done a phenomenal job keeping their facade up. They're a very nice asset to West Avenue, and just to try to make the rest of West Avenue look as nice as that, we are working on the West Avenue overlay with the zoning department, and we've had some meetings with that. Inside advisors, we're at our CIC meeting, which was Tuesday, April 30th. There's been a lot of discussion on the direction that the CIC wants to take, and so we're going to work on a guideline as to what the actual role they're going to take and use it as a tool for economic development. Insight is also developing a community and development profile for Tallmadge. They're going to pull together all the information about our community, any relevant statistics, and put it on a nice document with our branding on it so that we have it for potential businesses that want to come into the community, or even, residential developments or anything like that. As you know, we have the tour of the SECC. A couple of you guys, or Jessica was the one that went today, and we do have a couple other dates available tomorrow. I have Don Pavlik and Ted Roy are going tomorrow to go see the Consolidated Dispatch Center. And then Tuesday, it's Nick Rubino, Mary Gutman, and Jonathan Bolus. So everyone will get a nice chance. Adam, I'm sorry you're not going to be able to make it, but I know you've seen it in the past. The wheelchair basketball state champs, we do have a resolution waiting for them. We're just trying to work to secure a date. We were hopeful that we were going to be able to have them here today, but the date just did not work for them. So we're trying to narrow down a date, hopefully in June or July. And I know there's been some discussion that there might be a council meeting in June or July that might be canceled. So we really need to get that nailed down, not only for the wheelchair basketball resolution, but also we have things going through planning and zoning that are could potentially come to council, and we need to let them know when you guys are gonna have meetings. So if we could get, your summer schedule would be great. Okay, working on the Tallmadge Circular Newsletter. The next issue will come out in July. Again, a reminder about Memorial Day Parade, May 27th. At 10 o'clock is the step-off. Council, a reminder, it's customary to walk with the administration. Working again on the Circle Festival and Light Parade, August 10th. Trying to go quickly. National Police Week is next week, May 12th through the 18th. It pays special recognition to those law enforcement officers who've lost their lives in the line of duty and for the safety and protection of others. And May 15th, which actually happens to be in the middle of National Police Week, is the National Peace Officers Memorial Day. And so the officers will wear their traditional mourning badges over their badges, and this is a way that they honor the memory of men and women who sacrificed all that they had to serve others. And next week, we will also honor them with the thin blue line flags that will be on the poles on the circle. And I think that's about it. Oh, there's the National Police Week slide. And that's all that I have. Any questions?
Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right, moving on to our Director of Public Service.
Good evening. I'd like to request that ordinance 2024-40 be passed at first reading this evening, and I'd like to request consideration of ordinance 2024-41 be passed at first reading this evening. Memorial Day, as the mayor brought up, parade and service is Monday, May 27th at 10 a.m. off the circle. Don't forget the pancake breakfast as well, put on by the chambers. For the past month, the zoning department, 89 total permits were issued, 47 which were street openings, 32 were zoning certificates, code violations, you can see 52 open violations, 14 which were property disrepair, and 12 were junk, trash, and high grass. So at the end of the day, in the size city we're in, that's not too bad. I mean, when you consider it. So cemetery, we had 4 full burials, 3 were full and 1 was cremains, and then you can see the grave spaces and columbarium niches that are still available. Moving on to the parks, the membership there at the rec center was 8,012. That's a 10% increase from last year. Visits at the rec was 20,235. That's a 20% increase from last year. Unique visits, 2,654. And keep in mind, that's actually members that use their memberships. That's what that number indicates. Music on the Circle starts. New Wave Nation, June 6th. That's an 80s music classic band. Touch a Truck, which is always fun for the kids, is Saturday, June 8th. The shelter at Lions Park is complete except for the grass as well as the paved walkway. But it's turned out to be a great looking shelter. Howell Road Park renovations are still ongoing, and it's still on slate to be finished by May 31st. However, that doesn't mean that we open up the total park because the dog park needs grass.
And if the grass isn't growing, we're not gonna open up the dog park. So maybe 50% of it gets opened up. Maca Pool memberships are sold out. We sold 2,257. The slides have been recoated. The pool's being repainted. Terrible weather to be doing two things, painting and mowing. They're not going all that great. We'll see if we get 2 coats down on the pool. Right now, we've got 1 coat down. We're looking for lifeguards. We have 30 hired. The ones that we're looking for now are extras, just in case somebody calls off or there's vacations or something like that. That way we can keep everything covered. Summer pavement program, the concrete repair, which is being done by Don Worco, started this week. Everything's going pretty well. Pavement marking starts Sunday. This work starts at 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. and it's weather dependent. Depends on the temperature and also depends on the dew as well as the rain. Keep in mind, do not drive through the paint. It is against the Ohio Revised Code to drive through the paint. There is nobody signaling on that crew to drive through the paint because it's in their best interest not to do that because they have the Ohio Revised Code on their side. Asphalt paving program, we finally dialed in a date to get that started. That's July 8th, and that's being done by Cardinal Asphalt Company. The hydrant flushing is still ongoing. We're about 80% complete. There's probably about 1,290 hydrants that are out there. So far, only 3 have been that we found that weren't working. We got 2 of them back up and running. That's one of the reasons why we do the hydrant flushing, to make sure the hydrants are operating functional. We'd like to thank the fire department. They actually gave us an employee to go along with us and do the iPad work while the utility department was doing the flushing. That helped us out because that's a GPS program and it updates all the data, and it was great having them help us out this year. So thanks to the fire department. Something else we talked about, the lead and copper rule revision, which is being mandated by the EPA. We've got to identify all our lead lines in the city. Nice thing for this city, believe it or not, we don't have a lead line that is a main. So the city's lines are not lead, which is fantastic. Now we got to go around and check everybody's service lines that go to their house. So this is quite an undertaking. We have to have a report in by this October to the EPA. You can see the numbers there. So the house lines are 6,409. We can say for sure that there's 1,441 that are not lead, and that's based on, in 1988, they quit using lead lines, period, for water. So we have a total of 4,968 that we don't know about, so we have to check it. So that's the map we're working on. Say it's the iPad thing. Yeah, the green dots are the ones we've verified that are not lead going to the houses. We still have quite a few to go, as you can see. The weird thing is there's a formula that we only have to check 354. So the EPA came up with this. When you have a number, you can come up. If you check 354 that off of this formula, you don't have to check anymore. So keep your fingers crossed that we don't have any lead lines. And what that is so there's an illustration. So to the left is our main. Like I said, we don't have a lead line in the city that we own. The unknown service is coming off of that. We feel pretty confident since we didn't put in any lead lines that were our mains. We probably didn't put any service lines going to the meter that would be lead, but you never know, right? I mean, it's 50 years of water lines. And the real unknown is what the homeowner hired a plumber to put in, and that's what we're checking. So you've got to open up each vault, and there's a test you got to do to each line to figure this out.
Question for you. What if we find a lead line, what do we do?
Now we got to document it, and now you got to go check all 4,900. So we're just checking 354. You find one out of that 354, now you got to go check all 4,000.
They need to be replaced at some point, or
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the piece we got to all come together and figure something out. We're not quite there yet. We don't know what to do. Like I said, the blessing is the forefathers that put in the water service didn't use any lead on our side. Mm-hmm. It's the house lines we don't know about.
How far do we replace it up to the house if we find a line? Like,
We don't, that falls back on the property owner.
Property owner, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
But you can imagine that issue that's gonna arise.
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
just so everybody understands, this is something that, I mean, you know, can we hire 2 more people? I'm joking, but I'm being serious. I mean, this is really what I need. We looked at getting interns in here to help us, but that was a little bit astronomical. They wanted a lot of money to check 4,000 lines, as you can imagine. And that's what they got to base it off of, because they're anticipating that there's got to be a lead line in the system. So that's the end of my report, unless there's any questions.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
So I guess when you say it's astronomical for interns to do it, how is it cheaper for our employees to do it, though?
Simply because they know what they're doing. They're the water department employees that do and so they're faster at it.
Okay.
So as we're opening up meter pits to do a meter read, and we're also seeing if that house number falls in that 354, so they're checking it right there.
Okay.
And
So
then a couple days a week, we send them out just to do that.
it's still the most cost-effective thing for our people to do it?
Yes.
Okay.
And when you were saying interns, Akron, Kent, Mount U, wherever,
We went to the engineering firms and asked them to give us 3 quotes to send us over their interns. So
Okay.
And,
All right.
and we,
Yeah.
no thanks. I mean,
got it.
Mr. Rohr, I have a few
Yes.
questions for you. So it sounds like it's a very technical thing that needs to be done, that the homeowners in no shape or form can actually assist us in providing a sample, correct?
we have to send out notices in September or November, I can't remember which month, to everybody that has of the 4,000 people that could have a lead line, if we hit one in those 354. At that point, they can assist us by checking what's coming into their house. But that doesn't mean there wasn't a pigtail done off of the meter, and then, so there becomes a complication to it. So off the meter, there could have been a pigtail lead, and then off of that, they ran copper the rest of the way.
Okay.
So it becomes problematic. You got to check from that meter pit constantly.
Okay. My other question is, as you were showing the map, it sparked my memory about last year we were in discussion about software that the street department was going to be utilizing and updating it. Do you have any updates for us?
You'll love it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a very dangerous system. You'll be shocked at what we are doing with it. And we'll give an update. We just started using it about 45 days ago, but it's pretty direct. I mean, you want to know how many dead skunks we pick up? It tells you now. You want to know how many miles of ditching we do? It tells you now. You want to know how much money we spent on the Little League Parade? It tells you now. So it's
Great.
pretty impressive.
Great.
And I'll give a presentation, but let us get a couple more months in to make
Sure.
sure we got all the kinks out of it.
Great. Thank you. And then my last question is, I know we've finished the pavilion at Lyons, and is the one at Howe Road complete?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have any indication, or I guess a better question would be, who decides if we want to put like a name on the pavilion?
We thought about that, and right now, the ones do have names on it at Lines, but we also thought it would probably be better to use more generic park-like names, Oak Tree Shelter, Pine Tree Shelter. I mean, that way it's not named after somebody, why did that shelter get named after somebody? So you could either use numbers, 1, 2, 3, or you get clever and, Hemlock Shelter, you could use probably more nature-like, more park-like names to name after the shelters. And I think we're gonna go that route, that way no one gets offended.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question about when you had mentioned that there were a couple of tickets issued with grass being too long. I have a couple of constituents that are participating in No Mow May. So would they be at risk for getting ticketed if they're participating in No Mow May?
Yes.
They
Once that
would.
grass gets over 8 inches, we've got to come out and mow it. Ask
Okay.
them to mow it, and then they got 10 days they'll get posted, and in 10 days, if it's not mowed, we'll mow it.
And what is the specific fine for that?
They just get assessed the charge that we had to have a contractor mow it.
For mowing? Okay. Is that complaint driven?
For the most part,
Okay.
unless it's real egregious and, somebody drives by it and sees it. I mean, but yeah, most of the stuff's complaint driven.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions for the service director? Nope. Moving on to our director of finance.
Good evening. We finished the month of April. Everybody should have received their reports. We had a really strong month income tax-wise, had some great rebound in our net profit returns, and also our withholding is really strong right now. I do have a feeling, seeing that our individual taxes are down right now, it may be a little bit of the fact that maybe some employers are finally getting to the point where they're withholding for some of the work at homes that may have been having to pay by themselves the last few years. But overall, everything is running well financially within the budget and coming in as expected. And I would be glad to answer any questions if anybody has anything specific on the reports that I provided.
I have a question for you related to the collections that come from the JED. Is that seemingly increasing basically do you see it on a month-to-month basis? Do you see those numbers increase, or is it more like a quarterly?
So we get distributions monthly, so it just depends. The JED, because it's mainly withholding, you don't get the ups and downs like you
Right.
do with the individual taxes. And sometimes, they do have net profit out there, but that's not as much of a driver as the withholding is. So because it's based on wages and withholding as their primary source of revenue, we don't see as much fluctuation in that. We are seeing growth there. Obviously, we've had Hamrick Truck go in out there, so that's been a big push. In my report, you'll see withholding does look down there, but we did have a large employer out there the last few years that gave some pretty hefty bonuses that were not given this year, so you kind of see that backtrack. But overall, the businesses and the normal withholdings are staying strong. In 2025, we will have another rate increase. So in 2025, the JED rate will go to 2%. So next year, we will also see some increase from the JED in addition to job growth. We'll just see because of the rate increase. And then in 2028, the JED will go to our current 2.25%.
All right, thank you. I guess as I'm sitting here, earlier before we started the meeting, I had a question for you about the debt payment on the rec center. And so for members of council that didn't overhear that question, one of those debt payments is up in 2030 and the other one in 2031.
Correct.
So, and then knowing that the JED will increase in 2028 and 2025, do we anticipate, I guess, those are all increases, those are great for the city, great for, our revenue sources, our streams are all going to increase. We won't have the debt payment any longer. So I guess kind of thinking about that, and this is a bigger picture than probably in your category, but do we anticipate factoring that into kind of our long-term planning?
I think you definitely factor that in. I think we have to take a look at 5 years from now. I know Mayor Kilway has started the discussion about creating a 5-10-year plan. And there are, I believe, knowing that the rec center debt payments are going off, if we do have a big capital project that needs to occur, to start the planning now to know that we do have that revenue source that we may be able to, while we won't lose the debt payment, we can then we know we have that money to repurpose for a potential other capital issue with, we have, police department, what's the police department building like? We still have issues at station, with the aging fire station one. So having conversations about 5 years from now, what does that look like? And that extra debt capacity and that payment, what
Right.
is that available to do 5 years from now? Absolutely,
Yeah.
that is going to be
Great.
part of that conversation.
That's great to hear. I know just in the back of our minds, let's keep in mind our Parks Master Plan, and obviously Howe Road, great work on our first phase of, I think, 3 phases, maybe 4 phases out there. So along with some of our other parks. So I know that should be it's always a good one to consider spending money on. So thank you. Any further questions for Director of Finance? Moving on to Director of Law.
Thank you. Mayor Kilway already touched on the drug take-back that we had, which was very successful. And I wanted to just remind council, if they have not looked at their emails, to do that. If you have any individual questions, feel free to ask. But also to look at that webinar and participating in that either on your own time or collectively as I have shared with you. Thank you.
Will that webinar be available like after the event?
I'm not sure what they plan to do.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Oftentimes they are, but I don't know.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, I would also echo Mayor Kilway's request that if you are going to cancel any meetings this summer, if you could make that determination tonight, that would be very helpful, because we do have timing issues with things that need third readings that I need to know so I can plan accordingly for.
Understood. Yep. We will, I think there's a few of us that have some planned vacations, and we just haven't had time to really sit down and iron those out. So we will do that this evening before we leave. So, thank you. Moving on to any further questions for Director of Law before we move on? No? Thank you. Moving on to reports of standing committees of the council as a whole. Planning and Zoning Committee, Councilwoman Gutman.
Thank you. I'll call planning and zoning to order. We have nothing before us this evening. I would like to thank Mrs. Hessing for the staff report for the project at Franklin Road and Norcott Street. It's quite thorough. And beyond that, does anyone have anything for planning and zoning? Okay, then, seeing nothing, I'll close committee.
Thank you. Moving on to our Finance Committee, Councilman Pavlik.
Yes, I call the Finance Committee to order. The Finance Committee deals with budget, appropriations, reappropriations, bonds, franchises, investments, and expenditures. We currently have 6 ordinances tonight. 2 are in second reading and 4 in first. The first is Ordinance 2024-36, Exhibit A-Exhibit A Tracted, amending Ordinance 109-2021, rates, changes, and fees for the zoning department and providing for immediate enactment. Sponsor of this bill is Director of Public Service, Mr. Rohr. Mr. Rohr, do you have any comments?
No, just like last time, we did away with the limit signs and the temporary signs. I think we did that a couple meetings back, maybe even last year. We just haven't updated the cost sheet, this fee sheet here. And then natural landscape permit, that's those folks that may want to do a natural landscape. We didn't have a fee for that, so that's what that $30 is. That way we can take a look at the plans. And then on the second page, that certificate of design compliance, we don't have that. It doesn't exist. It was just something that got added in there, and it's actually above the certificate of appropriateness. That's what we use, so.
Council, is there any questions?
Yes, I have a couple questions. What is the permit for the landscaping? Like, what would
So
somebody justify, I guess?
in the code, it tells you, no native plants 3 foot or taller. You need buffers around it. It's just not going to be an unkept up to your neighbors. There's got to be a 20-foot buffer, 10-foot. I can't remember what the size is, but so that's for us to review, and then that's that permit that they got to get.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
How did the fees compare to other cities, other,
Pretty much right in line.
Yeah.
I mean,
okay.
Any additional comments, questions? If not, Mr. Rohr, would like this approved tonight or go to third reading?
Yeah, you can go through
Three
readings.
readings?
Yep.
Okay, all right, we'll save it for
Thank
next
you.
council meeting. Thank you. Next is a second reading for ordinance 2024-37, authorizing the Director of Public Service to advertise for bids and the mayor to enter into contract for miscellaneous repairs and remodeling of Fire Station 1 at 85 West Overdale Drive and providing for immediate enactment. Sponsor of this bill is Director of Public Service, Mr. Rohr. Do you have any additional comments that you want to add on this one?
No, still working on the specs. Should have it done hopefully before the next meeting. If not, I'll get a copy. I know you requested a copy of those specs. Before we go out to bid, I'll definitely get them. I mean, it's pretty much, it's repaint and replace. I mean, there's nothing fancy going on in that one, so.
Okay, thank you. Any additional comments or questions from council? Hearing none, we will move that into third reading at next meeting.
Thank you.
The first of the four of the first readings is ordinance 2024-38, authorizing the Director of Public Service to advertise for bids and the mayor to enter into a contract for snow removal and salting services for certain city properties. The sponsor of this bill is Director of Public Service, Mike Rohr. This ordinance has been read into record. Mr. Rohr, do you have any comments?
Yeah, so this is pretty normal. We use that contractor to handle parking lots after hours, so starting about midnight. We have a second shift during the winter months, but if it's snowing, I don't want to pull guys off to do parking lots. I'd rather keep them on the roads. The roads are the priority, so the contractor helps us with the parking lots. And so we based it on 25 snow events or ice events, and last time it was 55,000 for this, so.
Question, thank you for the comments. So we do the snow and salting now, correct?
Mm-hmm.
But the next ordinance is lawn mowing. Wouldn't we do that one and?
They're just all up. at the
They're
same
just,
time.
okay, all right, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, got it.
And if I can further clarify, they're kind of like housekeeping, but the contracts are three-year contracts, so they're usually a contract with renewal options, so you don't have them every year in January. These are kind of as they hit, so.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Is there any comments from council? With that, since this is kind of housekeeping, I was like we talked before, is there a motion on the floor?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Madam Clerk, if you can please call the roll.
Mary Gutman,
Yes.
Donald Pavlik,
Yes.
Ted Roy,
Yes.
Nick Rubino,
Yes.
Jonathan Bolus,
Yes.
Adam Bozick,
Yes.
Jessica Epstein,
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. With that, ordinance 2024-38 passes with a motion of 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is ordinance, the first reading of ordinance 2024-39, authorizing the Director of Public Service to advertise for bids and the mayor to enter into contract for the mowing and care of public land and providing for immediate enactment. Sponsor of this bill is Director of Public Service, Mr. Rohr. Any comments, Mr. Rohr?
Yeah, so this, as the law director pointed out, this is a 3-year contract with two-year renewals on it, so it's a 5-year contract technically. Last time we went out to bid, we based it on 30 weeks of mowing, and so that was 135,000 for the year. I mean, there again, it's well worth doing this.
Any
Just a
questions
question.
from council?
Yeah, in terms of the locations that are being serviced, does that fluctuate at all either throughout the year or year over year within the contract, or is it all,
Pretty steady.
it is, okay.
Yep.
Because I've just, lately, this may go to our earlier question, seen a lot of activity like along the roads as well that may be like what I would consider like private property, but there's like, like a tractor going up and down, like, I think it was like Northeast Avenue or.
Oh, that would be us mowing
Yeah.
roadside berms.
Yes.
That is not this.
That's, yeah.
Okay, so that's separate.
That's in-house, yeah, so we do roadside berming. a couple times a season. So that's our tractor going, that's our city tractor.
What else do we do in-house that would be excluded from this?
That's about the extent of it.
Oh, okay, so this would be like,
All
Parks and Rec, cemetery.
Yep, building here.
Okay.
Police department, fire departments.
and then you estimate out the number of times, like visits, obviously you don't have a crystal ball for like the weather, things like that, so.
We estimate once a week, and then the ball fields get mowed twice a week for certain weeks in the spring and then certain weeks in the fall, because that stuff's fertilized, and if you're not mowing it twice a week, you'll never stay on top of it.
And what about the cemetery?
It gets mowed once a week. They were out there this evening mowing in the rain. Mother's Day is Sunday, and they have no choice but to mow it. There again, I don't want it high. I'd rather have it clumpy and mowed for Mother's Day than high. So
And when does this, in terms of the bid, what is the start of the season and end of the season? for-
April to November. So first day of April, last day of November.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Out of curiosity, how many bids do you get when you advertise?
If we have 3, it's impressive.
Okay. All right.
Yep, that's a good number.
Any other questions or comments?
One other question, do you ever split up the bids, like if you had a company that just bid the cemetery versus just bid certain areas, like would you ever have multiple suppliers or vendors? Or would it all be exclusively on one?
It's all exclusively on one. That cemetery, I don't know if anybody would touch it with a 10-foot pole unless they got the rest of the contract.
Okay.
Any other additional questions or
Yes,
comments?
I have one last question. Have we ever looked at doing our mowing services in-house and what that would end up costing us?
Not for $135,000.
Yeah,
No, that's an employee and half, so that's not even the equipment. So,
thank you.
Okay, with that, is there a motion?
I'd make a motion to adopt.
Is there a
Second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, if you please call the roll.
Donald Havlet,
Yes.
Ted Roy,
Yes.
Nick Rubino,
Yes.
Jonathan Bolus.
Yes.
Adam Bozick,
Yes,
Jessica Epstein,
Yes.
Mary Gutman,
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. With that, ordinance 2024-39 passes with a motion of 7-0.
thank you.
Welcome. Next up, first reading is ordinance 2024-40, authorizing the mayor to extend a contract with TK Excavating and Grading in excess of 10% of the Elton Drive storm sewer replacement and providing for a needing enactment. Sponsor of this bill is Director of Service Mr. Rohr. The ordinance has been read in the record. Mr. Rohr, any comments?
Yes, so we had 2 change orders. As you know, I got to come back to council once I surpass the 10%. In the change orders, the total for the project was $47,277. One change order, which was $4,298, that was for changing the size of the opening on a catch basin. We needed 60 instead of 44. Contractor had to do that. Second change order was for additional work that the contractor had to do the grade change in the gas line that was on Thomas Road. We knew the gas line was there, but it dove. It was running along perfectly, and then it dove pretty quick down, and that was not what was anticipated, wasn't part of the plan. So we had to get that gas line to be moved, and then this additional work was based on the contractor. It was supposed to be a 1-week job, turned into a 2-week job, and just added more work onto him. And that was that $13,122 change order. Of that $13,122, $2,500 was additional plates that had to stay out there an extra week as road plates and road signage that directed you around the detour, which had to stay open an additional week.
Thank you for the explanation. Is there any questions or comments from council?
yes, I have a question. I'm looking at a map. It's going to be hard to kind of explain this because I'm looking at it and you can't see it, but the location of where we were doing the work, is it located directly at Elton Ave and Thomas?
So it crossed Thomas perpendicular, and it is just south of Elton Drive to the east.
So it's like that little gravel driveway that wraps around into the back of,
Yep.
okay. I guess, can you walk us back through the initial plan to do the work in that area? What brought that up?
A failing pipe. It was collapsing. So this is year 3 of that project.
Is that pipe on private property or is it in the public right of way?
It's in the right of way.
Okay. All right.
Any other additional comments or questions? And I know you had said during your comments that you would like to have this approved in first reading. So is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, if you please call the roll.
Ted Roy,
Yes.
Nick Rubino,
Yes.
Jonathan Bolus.
Yes.
Adam Bozick,
Yes.
Jessica Epstein,
Yes.
Mary Gutman,
Yes.
Donald Pavlik,
Yes. Thank you, Madam Clerk. With that, ordinance 2024-40 passes with a vote of 7-0.
Thank you.
Welcome. Next up is ordinance 2024-41, authorizing the mayor to contract with AECOM for engineering services for Northeast Avenue, State Route 261, and Middlebury Road roundabout, and providing for an immediate enactment. Director of this ordinance is Director of Public Service, Mr. Rohr. Mr. Rohr, any comments?
Yes, so the intersection of Middlebury and Northeast Avenue, the neighbors there kept complaining how dangerous that intersection is. We did a traffic study last year and was shocked to find out that over a 4-year span, there was 26 accidents. Thankfully, none of them were fatal, but there are still accidents there. So that warranted either a traffic signal or a roundabout could go in there. Last year, we approached about the traffic signal. Problem with the traffic signal is you still get accidents with them, and you actually get worse accidents than the stop sign there because people have a tendency to run the red light, right? So so the decision was made. Let's go engineer for a roundabout. We budgeted last year $200,000 for this. It'll be a 3-phase engineering for the roundabout. We are hoping that once the engineering's done, we score well to get ODOT funding and AMATS funding. So to get that, you got to follow the ODOT guidelines for hiring an engineer. So to do that, we had to we did a consultant selection committee, and myself and Ms. Epstein and the mayor were on that committee. It helped out having those two on the committee because they're not familiar with the engineers. I'm the only one that was familiar with the groups we were doing. So we solicited RFQs, and they submitted their qualifications. We went through them. We chose 2 to interview, one being GPD and the other one being AECOM. And at the end of the day, the 3 of us were unanimous that AECOM was the better of them. And this is refreshing because at the end of the day, I think Councilman Bozick asked in the housekeeping in January, do we ever use outside firms other than these housekeeping ones, GPD, EDG? And the answer is yes, this is one of those occasions that we do it. AECOM, ironically, is the same engineering firm who did the roundabout out on Monroe and Howard Avenue. They also did the expansion of North Avenue from the Circle North. So we have used AECOM, but it's been 7 years since we used them. What this engineering will do, it'll be phase 1, and you get existing records, research review, preliminary utility coordination, field survey and base mapping, traffic analysis, which is design, traffic volumes, capacity analysis, preliminary design, which is highway clearance analysis, pavement design, drainage and BMPs, which is best management practice, design criteria. The big one, preliminary geometrics. So that'll tell you the size of that roundabout. That's the one we really got to get to finish up, to move on. That's a key piece. Also with this, you'd get maintenance of traffic design, traffic control design, lighting design. You also get preliminary engineering miscellaneous, which is plan submittal to city, ODOT, utilities, stakeholders, cost estimate, checking quantities, progress meeting, coordination with ODOT, which is key. And then the big one here, put an asterisk by this, is coordination with AMATs, and that's where the funding comes from. So we budgeted 200,000, they came in at 197. So that's why I asked for consideration this be passed at first reading. I would love to get this rolling, so when we get in the budget, we know what phase 2 is gonna cost us.
Yeah. Got it. All that stuff, like you said, is important to determine the actual price of it, right? The size of the round, okay. Yep. Thank you for that explanation. Is there any comments or questions from council?
I had a question. Does the city of Kent participate in any of the activities we had just discussed, or in looking at the phases in the planning and engineering, and the funding of this? Like, does the city of Kent have any participation in this process?
They will as a stakeholder because they butt into it, but the roundabout will be exclusively in Tallmadge. It will not cross the border. It will not go into their territory at all, so.
Okay.
Just,
Okay.
thanks, Mr. Brolis. Other question, when you're heading west on 261, the speed limit in Kent, I believe, is 55.
Drops
And
down
it
to
drops
35.
down to 35, so.
And that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
And then-
Yeah, 100%, yeah. I mean, I live out that way. I mean, that's just shooting cars, and they just continue that speed down 261, and I got constituents that complain about the speed, obviously, on 261.
So with that being a state route, it's a real good chance that those speed limits coming out of Kent could change.
And I believe that's zoned industrial in that track right there in
Yep.
Kent, correct?
Yep, I believe you're
Okay.
right.
Is there any, because it's zoned industrial and it's a 2-lane, well, it dips to 1 before you get to Tallmadge, I believe, when it's in Kent. Any effect on reducing that speed when they're coming to a roundabout?
All that would be taken into consideration
Okay.
for this engineering, yep.
Right.
And we'd have to get Kent involved, but they have no skin in the game other than
Yeah.
just agreeing to it or disagreeing to it.
Okay. And I would believe the parks would have some sort of, the metro parks with that trail being
That would-
right there?
That would be a partnership too, and at the end of the day, we got to stay out of their parking lot.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
they built a new parking lot, but the
top.
old parking lot is ADA accessible, so they will not give that up.
Got it.
Yep, because it'd be ideal if they could give us that, but they're not going to.
Two more questions. In terms of the engineering services, like when you mentioned the phases in the ODOT guidelines, is there a restriction around like a timetable or a schedule that you have to abide by with the engineering services, like once you begin versus, okay. So there's no like set target, like it has to take you X amount of months or?
No, so let's use East Avenue, for example. So we start trying to get soliciting funds for that through ODOT in 2017. We started engineering in 2018. The engineering's not even done yet. That project's going to start in 2027. So that's the problem with some of these projects. I mean, this engineering goes forever and for good reason. They're testing everything. I mean, they got to do historical, they got to do all sorts of stuff out there, so.
Okay. And then just for my re-education, for section 4 of the ordinance, where it goes into affirmative vote of 3/4 of members of council for enacting immediately. So if you didn't receive 5 votes, that would just mean it would go in effect in how many days? Okay, versus immediately. Okay. I was just wondering what the impact of that would be on the services, like the timing of that too. So,
And that's why it's consideration. I mean, it would be great if you guys pass it first reading. If not, I'm good with it too. I mean, but just knowing that we're being crunched into July, I'd love to get some numbers going on this thing so I know what phase 2 is going to run.
I have a question for Mr. Rohr. I guess what rights or jurisdiction does the city have to add a road, change its course, or close a road, work on a road, those sort of things. So, not suggesting this, but if Tallmadge didn't have Middlebury Road off of 261, is that, what would happen? If that road were to end in Kent and not cross into Tallmadge?
We wouldn't have this problem.
Mr. Bozak, just to let you know also, this intersection has been like a problem for so long that when I was saying something to my father, who was born and raised in Kent, about we were looking into putting a roundabout there, he's like, well, that's about good time. You know, your grandfather got into an accident there way before you were even born, and it was a pretty bad one, so, you know. That Middlebury Road is such a direct connector into the back parts of Kent and that whole neighborhood of Kent. There would be no possibility of us ever
It's
closing that road off.
major cut through to Stowe.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
yes.
Yeah, but if it didn't touch, we wouldn't have this problem.
So I guess that's my point, is to suggest that I think our partnership with Kent could be a little closer due to the fact of it being such a connector into our city and their city, that there should be some cost sharing involved with the project. Because essentially what you just said was we could put up a road close sign on our side of the Middlebury
No,
and,
what I said is if it didn't exist, it wouldn't be a problem. So if there was no Middlebury, this wouldn't be an issue. But there is a Middlebury, and it's completely in Tallmadge. It's not, it's close to Kent, but it's not Kent's problem.
Any additional questions, comments?
I just have a, I guess, point of clarification. This is budgeted money. We're just authorizing a contract, right? We're not talking
Yes,
about.
AECom is not our normal housekeeping engineers that we typically go through, and that's why I'm here tonight asking that we,
So we've authorized this money in the budget. We're just voting on the contract.
to hire AECom. Yep,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Any additional questions, comments from council?
I was just going to add a comment, as I had probably the most background information. Thank you for inviting me to participate on that committee. I learned a lot about roads and how this process works, and I also really appreciate your excitement about this very riveting topic of roads. One of the things that I liked about this particular contractor is their creativity during the presentation. It was extremely thorough. And they also had a really strong willingness to coordinate with and solicit feedback and work directly with constituents. So that was particularly appealing to me. So I just wanted to add that feedback.
Thank you.
I'd move to adopt.
Okay.
Second.
Madam Clerk, if you please call the roll.
I have, you got to open it up to discussion.
Okay, open it, please, discussion.
Yeah, so I have one final question for Mr. Rohr. When they decided to open up the parking lot, the new parking lot for the park, did they undergo any kind of traffic study or any kind of engineering related to that corner?
I'd have to go back and look. That I don't know. I mean, off the top of my head, that had to be four years ago. I can't recall.
Okay. Because and when they built that, that's on, well, the new section, that's on the Kent side, correct?
That is on Stowe side, I think.
Or
I think
Stowe
that's
side.
Stowe side, yeah.
Wow, okay. Yeah, I'm just sitting here thinking if they've already conducted an engineering study for that, or understood that it was going to be an issue, Tallmadge just left footing the bill for something that we had no say in whether or not they put in additional parking, increase the traffic, those sort of things. Granted, it's not that we don't want the trail. We love the trail there. My family rides the trail all the time. So I'm not saying that we don't want the trail. I'm just simply saying that the city of Tallmadge had no involvement in whether or not it had a parking lot added to increase traffic that was already clearly an issue for many, many years. So if that's possible, that has already been handled, whether it's outdated or not, is that part of the contract with AECom to analyze studies that have already been conducted?
They probably would look at it, but at the end of the day, that's a study for a parking lot, not for a roundabout. So what's the impacts? I mean, I'm sure if there is such a thing, they'd look at it, but
But I'm saying when they built that, they don't have to look at the traffic at all to
the
determine.
parking lot or the roundabout?
When they built the parking lot, were they required to do any kind of a traffic
That's,
study?
there again, I don't know.
In
I
that
don't
area.
recall. I don't recall.
But if the work's has already been done, we shouldn't duplicate it. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, the two different traffic studies, so there again, I don't know if the one was done, I'll have to find out, but the traffic study we'll be doing now is for a roundabout.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. Any other comments on the two motions? Madam Clerk, if you can please call the roll.
Nick Rubino,
Yes.
Jonathan Bolus,
Yes.
Adam Bozick,
Yes.
Jessica Epstein,
Yes.
Mary Gutman,
Yes.
Donald Pavlik,
Yes.
Ted Roy,
Yes.
Okay, with that, ordinance 2024-41 is approved, the motion of 7-0.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all for the ordinances tonight. Is there anything else that needs to be brought before Finance Committee? Hearing none, I'll make the motion to close Finance Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to Personnel Committee, Councilman Bullis.
Yes, good evening. Call Personnel Committee to order. Personnel Committee deals with personnel, labor relations, insurance claims, rules of council, and state statutes. Tonight, we have no legislation. Any additional items by the administration or council this evening for Personnel Committee?
I have a question to
Yes.
the administration. Have we started our union contract negotiations?
Our Director of Administration starts on Monday, and that's one of the first things that he will be digging into.
Understood. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or topics for personnel? All right. Thank you. I close committee.
Thank you. Moving on to our Safety Committee, Councilman Rubino.
I call Safety Committee to order. The Safety Committee deals with disaster services, communications, fire, and paramedics, and police and health. We currently have no legislation before us this evening. Does anybody have any questions or comments for the Safety Committee?
Yes, I just wanted to add one thing. There was an accusation last council meeting that firefighter Sandy wasn't going in to the schools. I did see on social media a nice post that she visited Tallmadge High School last week. So just wanted to ask if you could pass it along a thank you for visiting the school.
Thank you. Any others? Hearing none, I close Safety Committee.
Thank you. Moving on, and for further comment, accusation and question are two totally separate things. So thank you for not clarifying that correctly. Moving on to community issues, Councilman Roy.
Community Issues Committee deals with Parks and Rec, civil affairs, and liaison between council and recreation board and the intergovernmental affairs. I'd like to call it to order. At this time, we have nothing on the agenda. Are there any additional items anybody has? And I will go ahead and close community issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Public Service Committee.
Thank you. I call the Public Service Committee to order. The Public Service Committee deals with streets, highways, sidewalks, buildings, and improvements, water, sewer, electricity, gas, energy resources, recycle, waste, and trash. We currently have nothing before us this evening. Is there anything, any additional comment?
Yes, I have a comment, and this is, I apologize I didn't mention this earlier when we were talking about the lead pipe testing. It just took me a little bit to do some Googling. I just wanted to mention the health effects of lead exposure as we were talking about the cost and the time that it takes to look for these pipes. I thought it was worthwhile just to bring up why we do it. I'm sure most of us probably know that there's no safe blood level of lead in children for lead, and that lead damages their brain and nervous systems, and it slows their growth and development, causes learning and behavior problems and hearing and speech problems, lowers IQs, decreases their ability to pay attention in school, and the damage can be permanent. And so obviously that's, quantifying that in any way with dollars seems kind of cold, but the cost to our society is tremendous. And so whatever expense we spend now to make our community safer for our babies and our kids in the long run is so valuable. So if we take all the time in the world and the money to find these pipes and replace them, I think it's a huge service to the community. So I'm glad we're doing it. So thank you.
Yes,
Thank you, Mrs. Gutman. Appreciate that.
if I could just say, this stems back to Flint, Michigan from like a decade ago when they failed to maintain their lead lines, and that this is why the EPA is having us go through and do all this.
I had one additional question. I believe in your presentation, or maybe one of your comments, you'd mentioned there was a year threshold, like 1988 or 87. So if a development went in, let's just say in the mid-90s or something like, and you find something, like, how is that on an individual, like, property owner versus, like, if somebody went in and built 200 homes and didn't follow, the proper guidelines?
By 90, there would be no lead lines left to sell. They were gone.
Right, so in looking at the map, like, can you exclude certain areas just based on? Okay.
Yep. So anything developed after 89. that
Okay, so
rule-
everything you showed there was within that range? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, so like Baker's Acres, we know we don't have to look at that, right?
Okay.
Right, so that was 2000 and,
Would it go by houses built after 89, or would it have to be the full development?
no, houses too. So by 90, all the lead was, you couldn't even buy it anywhere.
Yeah.
So if you build a house individually, and it was built after 90, it doesn't have lead lines.
Is there anything else? Hearing none, I close committee.
Thank you. Moving on to reports of special committee, Council Operations Committee. Mr. Bullis, do you have anything to report?
No report this evening.
Thank you. Any other announcements? No?
Calendar.
Entertain a motion for,
Calendar?
oh, I'm sorry.
Are you going to discuss your calendar?
Yes,
Thank
we
you.
will. Moving to discussion about our calendar.
So the last time we talked about the calendar, I think it was the 27th of June or something like that, our meeting. I said that I was not going to be here. I will be here.
Okay.
So I think that was the date that we had. I think, Ms. Epstein, you had said that I think you might be out of town that day as well, potentially, or that week.
In June, I think
Yeah.
I'll be okay. I'm just confirming the date in July, because I think there was one in July
Got
too,
it.
right?
It was July.
Yeah.
And I can confirm I will be out of town the week of the 10th of June.
That week should be fine. I'll be here for sure.
Yeah, I'll
that
be here.
week. I am out on June 27th. I am also out on the 18th, 25th of July. So I believe, I don't have the dates right in front of me, but
July is 11th and 25th, our meeting.
it is 11th and 25th.
Yeah.
Okay.
The 11th is suspect for me, but I can be here if need be.
And, sorry, Verbo kicked me out, so I had to log back in. It's actually, we'll be back, so I'll be fine in July as well.
Got it.
I don't think I'll have any conflicts.
All right, so I think it's a non-issue as long as our Vice President of Council will be present when I'm not. I think we're,
Yeah, July should be fine.
all right. No conflicts, so.
Yeah, I think that June
That
date
June-
was the main, the 27th was the date that we were looking, but
Sounds good. All right, now I'll entertain a
Thank you,
motion
Council.
for adjournment.
so moved.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk?
Jonathan Bolus,
Yes.
Adam Bozick.
Yes.
Jessica Epstein,
Yes.
Mary Gutman,
Yes.
Donald Pavlik,
Yes.
Ted Roy,
Yes.
Nick Rubino.
Yes.
All right, the time is 8:11 and we are adjourned. Thank you.